So obviously, in terms of packaging, removing single-use plastic from packaging is driven by legislation now. There's financial penalties. There's a lot of work that I do that involves trying to remove plastic from packaging. And I think that's a very, very different thing to when we consider plastic in the durable goods. And there's lots of examples of where single-use plastic is used like really irresponsibly and like quite stupidly, really. It's just waste. It's costing lots of money for no purpose. So there's a big piece of work there in terms of trying to remove plastics from packaging specifically. But it's not without its challenges, is it?
Welcome to Why Design. I'm Chris Whyte, and this podcast is about the people behind products shaping our world. Every week I sit down with design and engineering leaders who've turned ideas into real-world impact. We break down how they lead, how they learn from failure, and how they build teams that keep moving forward. Because great design isn't just about what looks good, it's about people, culture, and progress. If you care about building better products, leading stronger teams, or rediscovering the purpose behind your work, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Vicky, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It's nice to be here.
Lovely to meet you too as well, yeah. So Dr Vicky Lofthouse, sustainability consultant. Perhaps rather than me ramble my way through an intro, if you could give us the elevator pitch, let the listeners know who you are and what you do.
Sure. Hi. I'm Vicky Lofthouse. I founded a company called Enable Sustainability and work as a sustainable innovation consultant. So I help companies, typically product manufacturers, to integrate sustainability into the products that they make and sell, but also process. I work with end-of-life processes as well. I work across a whole variety of different sectors, across consumer electronics, FMCG, medical products, defence, all sorts of like a wonderful array of different products, and help them to integrate sustainability and often circularity into the work that they're doing.
Wonderful. So on this episode, we're going to, funnily enough, kind of dive into sustainability and sustainable product development, what it really looks like in practice beyond the buzzwords. So in no particular order, we're going to explore kind of the practical challenges and unexpected blockers companies face when trying to improve environmental impact, the role of circularity, product longevity, and remanufacture, why less plastic isn't always the right answer, and how to avoid greenwashing and greenwash traps. We're going to talk in a moment now about your career path and what you've learned about how designers and engineers can make a difference. And then we'll dive into some advice as well for people trying to break into sustainability roles, especially within obviously our core audience, which is the product development and manufacturing space. So as I always ask my guests near the start of the show, Vicky, why design? Where did it all begin? Where did your interest in design?
So it started at school. I was lucky enough to do design and technology, was quite across the curriculum a lot in those days when I was at school. So discovered at secondary school, discovered CDT. I was like, oh, this is brilliant. I love this. It was something I'd never come across before. I'd never done anything like that. I'd always had kind of done the academic subjects, never done anything like design, and just completely loved it. Was really blessed to have two really great teachers in quick succession. Went on to be like the first student to do an A-level in design at the school. I did a pretty bad job of my A-levels all in all, but then was extremely lucky to get into Loughborough University to do industrial design, which I decided was absolutely what I wanted to do, was my passion. And I just loved it. I loved the degree. It just completely set me on fire. I thought it was so interesting. There was just all the elements of it I just found complete. I absolutely loved my degree. And then I also discovered while I was there this thing called green design, which I was like, oh, that is so cool. So what I really liked there was it kind of was like this additional innovation challenge that having to think about something other than usability, ergonomics, the size, the fit, all that stuff, which is really complicated in itself. But then it bringing in this extra sort of additional element I found really interesting. So kind of two answers in one there.
No, it's brilliant. I was going to ask, where did sustainability first come into thinking? But it was one of the modules, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the professor of our school gave us an introduction to green design. I learned about Victor Papanek and Dorothy Mackenzie, and they were kind of like the kind of my first footsteps into like the world of green design that became eco design, that became sustainable design. It was very early days. So like end of the 90s, it was really early days for practicing sort of sustainable design, and there was very, very little going on actually in like the real world, out in the industry. So this is how I ended up doing a PhD.
Do you remember what the key kind of pillars were? I guess and now that you're lecturing, where the key differences are to what they were teaching back in the late 90s to obviously we know a lot more now, don't we?
Yeah, huge differences. So I set up. I moved to Loughborough University as a senior lecturer. First of all, lecturer, then senior lecturer. Back in about 2003, and we set up a module on sustainable design then. Working with another colleague, Eddie Norman, we set up this module, which was, I think, one of the first of its kind. So certainly when I was a student, it was probably one lecture, and I think we wrote an essay on some stuff. Which is, so it's amazing it inspired me as much as it did, but it obviously did. And then, but now they get a huge amount of input. They have input, certainly in the Loughborough, students get input across all 3 years, and there's an elective module in the 3rd year. So for students who are interested, and I know many are, because I get contacted by students every year who are like, how do I do this? How can I get into this world? There is an awful lot more that they're given, and actually we're really only limited by the time available, which is always a bit of a challenge, kind of fitting in different all the different topics and different subjects without overloading the student group. So yeah, the difference is phenomenally different, and I know that it's now taught across many more design-based universities, certainly in the UK and in Europe and beyond. So it's much more widely talked about. The language is much more mature. The understanding of the concepts is more mature. It's feeding into an industry where the government's made climate commitments that are legally binding. So it's all the whole landscape has changed, kind of beyond recognition since the late 1990s, really. Yeah.
Wonderful. And so going back to your time then as a student, you came out of Loughborough, and then looks like you did a couple of years in industrial design as a consultancy.
I did, yeah. Worked for a small consultancy for a couple of years, and it just wasn't really kind of like considering how I was kind of so passionate, and it just wasn't quite kind of taking what I wanted to do. It was also a really difficult time. Most of us graduating that year, we weren't expecting to get jobs. The market was dreadful. It was a really, really bad time for design. We actually all did get jobs, and we all went on to, most of us either stayed in design or kind of retrained and moved into marketing engineering. It's quite it's one of those degrees, I think, where you can actually go off into different directions. So after a couple of years, I was a bit disillusioned and kind of decided I was going to go travelling and kind of give it all up. And in the process of doing that, I had a job advert at Cranfield University came up, and I was like, okay, that looks interesting. It was working with Electrolux to do an eco design project, and I was like, that is literally what I've always wanted to do. That's amazing. I need to go for that. So I went along and I had a chat with them, and was offered the job, which was brilliant. What I didn't realise, it was actually a research position for a PhD studentship.
Okay.
So I was kind of, my jaw hit the floor, and I kind of drove home going, what the hell? What the hell am I doing? I would never have put myself in that sort of the place of the sort of person that would be doing a PhD. Although I've kind of always worked hard at school and was relatively academic, I certainly wasn't like super academic. So yeah, it was a real massive pivotal moment in my life, and completely unexpected, but driven by this desire to work with Electrolux to develop. They wanted to develop the world's most environmentally friendly cooker. That was their desire at the time. And I consequently sponsored two PhD studentships, of which I got one of them. So really, really pivotal and very surprising time that took a little while to get my head around. But
so you kind of, you mentioned on your LinkedIn profile you fell into a PhD, but you kind of tripped over it by the advert clearly didn't mention that it was a PhD research
Well, no,
position, I
I think
guess.
it was probably my lack of knowledge about
Yeah,
academia because I just wasn't my area at all, and it was
yeah,
I think it was called a research associate position, and I was like, yeah, okay, that sounds great. I'd like to do a
okay,
bit
yeah.
of research. I've always been interested in research, and yeah, it wasn't more than that.
Had it had PhD kind of prominently in there, do you think you might have had second thoughts about applying?
Do you know, that's a really good question, and yeah, I probably would have. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I certainly didn't feel like somebody who was PhD material or would do a PhD. It really wasn't something that I ever thought about in yeah, I probably wouldn't have gone that way. Yeah, good question.
So we're kind of skipping to the advice bit here, but I think it's obviously it's relevant to obviously your journey studying the PhD.
Mm.
What would you think? You think about PhDs kind of from the outside looking in. They're a lot of work. It's a lot of study. Lots of lots of coursework. You've got to put your thesis together.
Mm.
Having kind of never thought you'd do one to then going through it, do you think there are any kind of common misconceptions or things that people should kind of know that might actually change their mind about taking one on?
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it, I have to say. I mean, it was extremely hard work, but I did really enjoy it. I'm a naturally very curious person, and I think if you come from a place of curiosity, a PhD is actually a really good fit because um, that's really what it is. It's about being, I mean, I did mine within design, so it's about being curious about people, the way they interact with stuff. I was looking at the whole focus area was integrating integrating eco design into industrial design practice. So it was very much taking my industrial design background and working with industrial designers to try and understand how to get them to think and not just think, but like do sustainable design within their practice and the challenges understanding the challenges and trying to kind of work their way around them. Um, so yeah, I wasn't a practice led PhD. It was a like a normal theory based PhD, but it was very practical. And I did a lot of kind of talking to people, and it's kind of like, a lot of our students really enjoy the kind of research element of the projects that we set, and actually it's just an extension of that, really,
Yeah.
but with some serious writing. So you do have to get to grips with the writing as well, because I've subsequently supervised probably about 12 PhD students, and the ones with a design background are probably the hardest to get to commit pen to paper. They still do a great job in the end, but yeah, so I really enjoyed it. I finished my PhD very much a researcher. I still really enjoy research. It's kind of a lot of what I do within my business. It's what I've always really enjoyed. And it's really just about finding out new stuff and always learning. And I really love that.
Wonderful, wonderful. So where did you finished the research, you finished your PhD with Electrolux. Where did it take you then? Was it straight back into Loughborough, or did you do something else?
So I did my PhD at Cranfield, and it was a really difficult time in some ways, because I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with companies and help them to integrate sustainability, that like I had done with Electrolux. It was very much what I wanted to do, like career-wise. But there really wasn't very much going on in the UK at all. Electrolux were doing a little bit. Obviously, they were doing a bit. I think Hotpoint were doing a little bit. There was a few little bits here and there, but there wasn't very much. There was quite a lot of work going on in the Netherlands, but actually for me at the time, it wasn't a really appropriate move to go to the Netherlands. That wasn't really the path I was looking for. So it was quite challenging, because the thing I really wanted to do, I couldn't do very easily. So I ended up going into academia. We got some funding for a research project that I led the funding for, and then I worked on that for a couple of years and did a couple of subsequent research projects, which I did really enjoy, and I learned a lot. So I did, because I did really have that passion for research as well. I kind of continued in that area, but there was a kind of a bit of a lag between like where I was with the research, because it's generally so much further ahead than where actual practice is. So it was quite challenging in that respect, and probably explains why it's taken me so long to kind of extract myself from academia to then do the business full time. But so it's probably fair to say along the way, the kind of opportunities cropped up with various different companies who I did bits of consultancy work for, sort of more, really much more as a side hustle, really kind of helping them along the way. But it's certainly, I didn't feel there was enough work out there for certainly anything sustained. So it was, I was waiting really for industry to catch up with the stuff I really wanted to be doing.
Yeah, without wanting to sound too cheesy, but it sounds like it's much more of a sustainable career in sustainability these days than when you were getting
definitely
getting going.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's back in those days, the WE directive hadn't even been launched actually, so there wasn't even any eco legislation. That sort of came a little bit later, and we thought that might bring some sort of like momentum, but really it just meant that people paid it off. Really, they didn't really change the way that people design their products. So it has been quite slow. And really, my way of dealing with that was to kind of make sure I was doing interesting research that was situated within sustainability, but also supporting companies I've always worked with. So all my research projects have always been with companies who wanted to make change and invest. So did a really big research project with Boots, which was really interesting, all in refillable packaging, which wasn't even a thing at the time. So yeah, did some really interesting work that was kind of like keep moving it forward, but just not actually in that kind of consultancy space.
I love those innovations. I've been working with a company called Meadow, based over in Sweden, but they've got R&D sites in and around London, and they're, because I use the refillable like soap bottles, you can buy, but you always end up with a bit of plastic, and the soap goes everywhere. What Meadow have done is they've put it into tin cans, so you have one dispenser that you have to use to open the can, so you can't access it any other way. They've crimped the top so it doesn't look or feel like a drinks can, because that was a bit of a nightmare for the legal boffins over at Unilever, etc., to get their heads around. How can we put something in a can because someone's going to drink it? And it's it's mess free. Everyone knows what they're doing with cans, so everything gets recycled, and it's a really neat solution. So I love seeing that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of those sorts of innovations. Yeah. So I do. I currently have a monthly newsletter, and I always I always collate 4 different sustainable innovations to share, because I just think those sort of things are so inspiring for people. It's great to see that it's doable and that people can, that there are solutions, and who's working in the field. So
absolutely,
yeah, great example.
So you've been lecturing for 20 years or so now, by the looks of it, and then
about 1,000 years, something like that. Yeah, something coming up for
that. But also, you're running your own sustainability consulting now. You mentioned that you were picking up bits and bobs along the way. How did those early kind of projects come about? Just kind of chance encounters, or?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's hard to think. I think quite often I knew people who knew people. So also, I suppose when I was doing the PhD, I was interviewing people and getting them to. So I created something called Information Inspiration, which was a tool for designers, and I needed to then test it with people. So I was working with. I kind of just went to the library and printed off a big long list of design consultants and rang them all, and some said yes and some said no. So that was kind of like a really weird period of cold calling people, but I ended up getting lots of people signed up, and so I made lots of connections that way, and then I think that's kind of where it came from. Kind of like I'd met people, and then they were like, "Oh, we need to do this thing. Are you interested? And can you help with that?" So it was through a combination of referrals and just kind of connections that I've made with people through networking.
Yeah, good old fashioned kind of research and cold calling. It's but I'm guessing you weren't necessarily selling or pitching anything, were you? You're saying, this is what I'm doing. I'm looking for people to get involved. Right? There's no strings attached. And then it's like,
they were all freebies. Everyone loves a freebie.
Everyone loves a freebie, but you're demonstrating your expertise there. And if you speak to enough people, and leave a positive impression, generally speaking, good things will happen at some point.
Exactly.
So wonderful. Yes. So today your focus is on obviously sustainability. You're still lecturing, are you, or is it mainly the consultants?
I will be lecturing until September of this year, and then I'm going all in
full time.
So I'm still going back and doing a little bit, I think, but my primary focus will be on the company and building my client base and working with more people, helping them to do great
times.
Stuff.
So this, by the time this episode goes out, then you'll be full time with Enable. What was the? Do you remember? Was there like a pivotal moment where you decided, right, this is the date that I'm just going all in on this? If you're serious about growing in design or engineering, you should join the Why Design community on Discord. It's where product leaders share real lessons, job opportunities, and behind-the-scenes insights you won't find anywhere else. And if you want more stories and strategies from the world of product development, subscribe to the Why Design newsletter. Both links are in the show notes, so go check them out.
Yeah, yes, there was. So about 4 years ago, it's never tidy, it's never clean, it's always a bit messy, isn't it? So I had one of those throw your toys out the pram moments and was like, I need to leave, I've had enough, I need to do what I want to do. And then kind of got talked down a bit and was like, right, we'll go 2 days a week. That's fine. So I kind of dialed down the academic world and kind of had space then to build the business. So I've been doing that for 4 years. And then last November, I was at an event, which is a kind of like business development event run by a woman called Dawn Owen. It's the High Vibe Live. It's a fantastic event. Went along to that and spent the entire day having a kind of internal mini meltdown as to what was I doing with my life. And then kind of left there. Next morning I was walking the dog and was like, yeah, I need to leave. That's it. It's the decision made. So time to leave, time to do really go in on the business and just go for it. So quite a distinctive day, and I blame the dog really. So it was all his fault. But these things always take a bit of brewing, I think, and then when it's right, and it's definitely right. It's a good decision.
Absolutely, yeah. My moment was, I'd been thinking about setting up my business for probably 3 or 4 years before I actually kind of took the plunge, because I loved the environment that I worked in, the people. I'd spent 10.5 years there. It was, in the end, it made some lifelong friends there. But I just was hungry for something more. I knew there was different ways of doing things, and I wanted the freedom to make my own decisions and take risks and provide great value. But the pivotal moment for me was when I was running an event with LV down in Bristol. And we had a great turnout of industry leaders turn up, and we were sharing insights on user-centered design, inclusive design, led by Tom Malloy. He was on the podcast way back when we first started it. So thank you, Tom, for being my guinea pig on this. But so it's such a fantastic event, and the feedback we had was wonderful. I just remember, driving back with a big grin on my face because I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then the next couple of days, people come and say, "Hey, Chris, that was great. When are you doing the next one?" And it just dawned on me, I didn't want to do another one for that company. That if I was going to do this, I wanted to build a business around community and values, and I couldn't keep doing that for someone else and then go and start. So that was my kind of moment of not necessarily throw my toys out the pram, but it was that light bulb moment of epiphany. That's it. Yeah. So wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that. So obviously by the time this comes out, we're full in kind of in consultant mode. Let's talk about the real world complexity of sustainable design, and let's kind of dive into sustainability. So as hopefully our listeners know, and as you'll attest, it's not a one size fits all, and it's
definitely
whatever's right for that business, and also the context around it. But perhaps you could tell us what kind of companies are you working with or have been working with through Enable?
So I work with a whole variety of companies across loads of different sectors. So the entry point is that they've recognised that sustainability is important, and they want to either want to do something or they want some help to do more stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where I come in. So I'm not really in the business of convincing people it's important. I say that I've got another little initiative I'm about to launch, which is actually convincing people it's important. But normally my focus is on working with people who already get it, and they're just a bit swamped. So they kind of, they either, they've got all these ideas and they don't know where to start, or they can see that it's really important for the business. There's a lot of, they can see the risk. There's a lady I'm working with at the moment who's not a product person. She's not a design person at all, but she's totally like gets the risk involved with not engaging with sustainability. So that's why she's kind of interested in working with me and talking to me, because from her kind of like more um, organizational management perspective, she's like, this is a risk to our business. We need to know more. We need to know what we're doing. We need some help. So it's that through to working with like sustainability managers who have like so much to do, and there's maybe them and maybe they've got like someone else that they employ now, and it's usually quite a small team. It's always a smaller team than the need. So yeah, that's the sort of people that I often work with.
And what are some of the kind of the common misconceptions that companies or your clients have about what it takes to, in air quotes, go green?
So the focus I pretty much always have is on product. It's on the product area. So there's lots of people who focus on sort of scope 1 and scope 2, which is kind of like greening the business. So that would be like putting solar panels on your roof and reducing your water, reducing your waste, that sort of thing. That is something that many of my clients think about. It's not an area I explicitly help them with. So often the preconceptions tend to be around that scope 1 and scope 2 area, because that's more your kind of like business level concerns. Scope 3 type of work that we look at, which is, so when I talk about scope 3, I'm talking about the carbon, it's all measured in carbon equivalent. So it's kind of, we're trying to, the whole point is to try and reduce the amount of carbon that your business is creating, and it might be through like the infrastructure of the business, or it might be through the products that you create. If you're looking at the products, it's usually everything that you're looking at, because the products are the most difficult bit. So typically the companies I work with have already kind of done that first bit, and then they're kind of going, actually, right, what can we do with the products that we've got? So it might be so that's kind of not quite answering your question, but it's kind of, I think, setting it within the context of the sort of the way that we work. I think the common thing that happens to me all the time is that clients come to me asking for one thing and it's not quite the right thing. So they've so you have to kind of quite carefully work out how to frame it so that it like prove them wrong without annoying them and show them the right direction, all in one nice little friendly package. Because sometimes they kind of they've latched onto something that they think is going to be the solution, but it's not evidence-based. So they haven't actually underpinned that with any sort of evaluation to actually work out what is going to make a bigger difference. So that's, in terms of misconceptions, that's probably my kind of the key thing I find when I've had that with 3 or 4 of the clients that I've worked with quite recently, and it's kind of like it's quite heartening, really, because it means that they've made the effort, they've worked out that something needs to be done. They think it's this, they've kind of done some sort of thinking, but that's what I can help there by coming in and sort of helping to do proper assessments to work out actually what you really need to be focusing is on this, and if you focus on this, you'll have a much bigger impact. It's probably going to be easier, it might save you more money than actually this thing that you were thinking was going to be really important. It's maybe a bit more spurious.
I think
that's quite a common problem.
The obvious one is plastic, isn't it? It's it's vilified in the media, but from the conversations I've had, quite often you think the obvious route is to take plastic out of the product, but what do you replace it with? And if it's replaced it with recycled plastic, is it as durable? Because there's an argument to say, if you build something to last a lifetime, rather than having to recycle it, or is it going to but plastic's really handy.
Complex. It is really handy, and that's why it's so complex. So I do have a lot of clients who actually an entry point often with clients is packaging for me. It's quite often it's front facing, customer facing. They're kind of like, oh God, we need to sort our packaging out. Can you help? So obviously, in terms of packaging, removing single-use plastic from packaging is driven by legislation now. There's financial penalties for not doing so. There's a lot of work that I do that involves trying to remove plastic from packaging, and I think that's a very, very different thing to when we consider plastic in the durable goods. I think that it's a very, very different purpose that we're using the material for. There's lots of examples of where single-use plastic is used like really irresponsibly and like quite stupidly. Really, it's just waste. It's costing lots of money for no purpose. So there's a big piece of work there in terms of trying to remove plastics from packaging specifically, but it's not without its challenges. It's massively difficult because plastic's really good at what it does. It's really light. It usually comes up better from a carbon perspective because it's like you only need a tiny bit of it to do the, protect it, move it, print it, communicate, do all the things. And if you switch that out for something like paperboard, it's already heavier. So immediately there's kind of there's these challenges. And I think, as you said at the beginning, context is absolutely critical. And I would, with every client I work with, that like understanding their context and designing for their context is absolutely key. So I did some work with a company who make airline meals. So they're flying these things. The context there is the fact that they ultimately, it doesn't really matter what you make it out of, as light as possible is the most important thing, because it's flying backwards and forwards across the world all the time, and there's hundreds of them, thousands of them. So really, absolutely, context is super, super important. But plastic does really, it's a really interesting one. I think from a consumer point of view, people hate it. They think it's like dreadful. From a design point of view, we know that actually it's extremely good at doing a lot of things really well, and it's really cheap. It won't continue to be really cheap because there are supply chain costs that are going to come in. It's going to become more expensive. So actually, if we can build in more circular ways of bringing plastic back, not having it in this sort of take, use, dispose kind of area, so moving it out of that single-use place, which is the place where, the biggest focus in terms of removing plastic is in single-use. But then also, within more durable product design, looking at like lightweighting and clever ways of using less plastic, using things such as SLA to create things so we can create more clever web-based sort of webbed materials. And there's some really interesting work that can be done in that respect to sort of help to mitigate the overuse of plastic.
Yeah, so have you seen the work that like Notpla and Kelpie and Sway are doing around kind of films, like seaweed-based films?
There's some really interesting innovations in terms of plastics and different types of bioplastics and different ways that I'm not even going to get into bioplastics, but they're very complicated. Is my one takeaway that I would give you on bioplastics. They're very, very complicated, and it's definitely not a one-word answer. But there's still some really, really interesting innovation going on, and if it's applied in the right context and used in the right place, because some really interesting opportunities, I think, for solving different problems.
It's a really interesting topic, isn't it? Because when you think about, it's super complex, because on the one hand, you've got the public perception, like plastic is bad, but the actual reality is, that's like usually out of context. Paper isn't necessarily a better use because it gets soggy and it weighs more than the equivalent plastic, but then it tends to get recycled more. There's all these trade-offs kind of and counter arguments, isn't there? And then when you look at like the exciting innovations in, like I've just mentioned with Notpla and Kelpie and Sway, in terms of the what they're doing, that's exciting, but it's actually right now it's probably a lot more carbon damaging than kind of creating the equivalent plastic, because it's still in R&D, it's still in, they're not economies of scale just yet. So
I think the ones that are coming from bio, like the sort of seaweed based, I think they'll be kind of absorbing carbon as they grow. So I think that's really interesting. And there's some pretty cool stuff in terms of like drop-in plastics to create bio-based alternatives to polyprop and PET. And actually, one of the things that's been very good, like really interesting to see, is that as the legislation was landing, like a year or two ago, the scale of innovation in terms of like different types of plastics and different plastic innovations has gone through the roof. So actually, we've gone from a place of like, yeah, there's polyprop and PET and blah blah, we haven't really got much else, to this like they are all in development, as you say. They're still coming through the progression of the development phases, but there's some really interesting materials emerging that we just haven't had the opportunity to use before. So in that respect, the legislation has driven quite a lot of innovation.
Yeah, it's exciting times. Can you share a project or two where small, unexpected changes, because you mentioned that often the clients come to you and they have an idea, but it's not actually the right path. So where a small, unexpected change from either side has had a big impact?
So the one that always jumps to mind is that I had a client who came to me and they wanted compostable packaging. I was kind of like, right, okay. And actually it's this company who sells to the airline industry, because actually you need to know the context. And they were like, yeah, we want to do compostable packaging, which from their point of view made a lot of sense, because they were like, well, all the food is composted. We want to compost the packaging. But the trouble was that the legislation around all of this is extremely tight, extremely complicated, and it would have required legislative change, which takes like forever. It's really, really slow. Also, a lot of waste that is flown through the air has to be incinerated. That's legal requirement because of things like mad cow's disease. There's really tight restrictions on organic matter that's flown around the world, and for many routes it has to be incinerated at the end. So I ended up doing a little kind of carbon analysis to show them actually that for every gram that they saved, they would be saving this much carbon over this many flights. So it kind of like changed the way that the industry were thinking about it. So it was actually picked up by the ASF, which is the aviation, I can't remember the full name, but the ASF took it up, and so that companies could actually work out the carbon impact of flying food packaging around the world. So that was kind of like, we sort of started off with compostable packaging and ended up with like basically make it lightweight. And ideally, if it's going to be incinerated, so give it a good calorific value when you burn it. So in that respect, you go, well, that's plastic because it's super light and it'll bring back some value when it's burnt. Yeah, which is quite controversial, because obviously that's not the way it's all going. So again, it's about understanding the context, and often these things I'm very much shortcutting today when we're chatting, and it isn't that straightforward. Quite often, certainly when I'm writing reports, it's kind of like you need to consider this, this, and this, and actually we talked about we're going to talk about greenwashing a bit, but these things are really important. You need to have a really clear understanding of what you're promising and what the expectation is and what the savings are. And you need to be very open about what you're talking about. But that doesn't mean you always have to comply with like the general wisdom, which is not necessarily wisdom. It's more kind of hearsay and chit chat and follow on Google. So there was a bit of a challenge, because obviously you then got to sell it to the client and to the customer. So having a really kind of clear rationale as to why you've chosen to go down the route you've chosen, that may not necessarily be what the general public expect, is really important. And that's where these sort of analysis tools can be really helpful, because they can they provide evidence, and there's challenges in that as well, but they provide a degree of evidence to support the decisions that you've made.
Yeah, and I'm guessing in that context, having a lighter weight packaging means that it costs less to transport, costs less to actually move the plane as well, use less fuel potentially.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you can
using less aviation fuel, which is absolutely. And when you've got 500 seats on board and everyone's got a dinner, that's fine. There's probably 1,000 dinners on board, and for every .1 of a gram you can save, you're saving aviation fuel. Which in terms of, if we're looking at sustainability, the plastics are relevant. The aviation fuel is by far the biggest issue. So it's about kind of those trade-offs and going, well, actually sometimes some things are more important than others. And by kind of having the assessments that you can do give you some numbers, which they're never accurate, but they help to give you a proportionate understanding of where the impact lies. And then you can address the things that really matter. So there's no point in addressing something that's come up as really small and really insignificant. It might be easy, but it's not going to lead to any benefits. Sometimes, though, those things can lead to kind of consumer facing benefits or more brand benefits. So, it's complicated, but having that kind of like open mind is really important.
Yeah, massively. That's really interesting. So that kind of brings us on nicely to circular economy. So what exactly does circular economy mean in the context of product development for those that aren't familiar with it?
In the context of product development, it typically means trying to keep resources, which might be in the form of components or materials, in use for as long as possible. It can be approached in lots of different ways. So it might be to do with modularity. So, for example, like the Framework laptop's a really nice example of this. So they've created a laptop which allows you can build it for the spec that you need. It's particularly suited for large companies who have, like, I don't know, maybe like a bank of 500 laptops that they deliver out to various people, and they can adapt it accordingly for the type of roles that people have. So that's very much taking on a modular approach, so that you can then bring things back and use them in different places, and you kind of run things. It's not like with a typical laptop where it would reach the end of its life cycle and hopefully be recycled at the very least. But it's really about recognizing that recycling is like the last resort, really. We all think of sort of recycling as a really good thing, and everyone's quite proud of what they do, but actually if we can keep things in use for longer, that's much better than recycling. So other ways of integrating circular economy would be to so if you, for example, have a service-based industry, then you can, and you're owning your products, then they come back to you, you can strip them down, you can reuse modules, you can, if you've got plastics that are have been aged over time, then they can be ground down and refed back into your own material batches. So there's all sorts of things you can do in terms of like recouping and reusing components, but also materials, substructures as well. But all of that would come under the circular economy.
And are there any, particular design strategies you can think of, that work well to extend product life, like you said, to keep it out of recycling? Any that you've seen that have worked well? I wanted to pause a moment to talk about Kodu, the specialist recruitment partner for physical product teams. When founders outgrow their early team and need engineers who can scale hardware, that's where we step in. When design consultancies win more projects than their teams can handle, we help them find senior designers who deliver without losing creative quality. And when established brands push into new hardware categories, we bring in leaders who've built category-defining products before. If you're hiring or planning your next move in product design or engineering, head over to teamkodu.com or connect with me, Chris Whyte, on LinkedIn.
Yeah, so there's loads of different ways in which that can happen. So there's plenty of companies who design for long life. So I, for example, have Global Knives, which I've had since I got married 20-something years ago, and will probably have till the day I die, because they don't change. They just sit there, and they're brilliant, and they're designed for durability and longevity. And so there are like lots of examples of products out there that are designed to have a longer life. They're usually higher end, they cost more, people have to invest in that lifetime, but once you've invested, you keep them. There's products like Trip Trap, the chair that starts off as a sort of a baby seat and ends up being an adult seat later on in life, which is a beautiful piece of furniture design that's been around for years, like 25 years probably, and the idea is that it grows with your family. There's all sorts of examples of products that are designed to last a really, really long time. There's also kind of strategies that you can employ when you're designing things in terms of thinking about how people engage with the product. So is it something that they emotionally bond with, so that they want to keep it for a long time? They like the fact it's a little bit scuffed and it's like the penknife that's been in your family for it's your granddad's and it's your dad's and it's yours. Those sorts of things, that emotional bonding, they are kind of elements that you can design into products. So yeah, there's loads of different really interesting strategies that you can think of, both in terms of the way that consumers interact with products, the way that they relate to the products that they've got, and also thinking about things about how easily things are upgraded, how in terms of your tech, whether your iPad, for example, can be, is it going to become technologically obsolete, or can it be upgraded? Yeah, of course it can be upgraded. It's a big glass screen with a load of tech inside. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. It doesn't need to be like the next generation. So there's a whole bunch of that sort of thing that you can think about, but also things like, like secondhand markets, not like refurbished markets. So my Dell computer is refurbished. It's brilliant. It doesn't look like anybody's ever touched it. But there's a whole kind of raft of companies that now are set up to take tech back, sort it out, and then resell it. So again, all of that material, every time you buy a product, every time you choose to buy a product that's being refurbished, you are saving a lot of resource. And actually, for companies who are measuring their carbon, which will become more and more important for all companies, but if you are measuring your carbon, if you're buying refurbished equipment, that's going to reduce your scope to impact, because you're having less impact in your business. So there's all sorts of loads and loads of different kind of strategies from a design point of view, and like why you would engage with them. I could go on for that for hours.
I've got a refurbished Herman Miller chair, which I wish I'd invested in a few years ago, because the old one was giving me back grief. But this is great. You'd never know.
But Herman Miller are a fantastic example. That they do. I mean, they probably are one of the longest standing examples that I've used to kind of illustrate good practice to people, because for as long as I've known, they've used green energy across all their factories. They manufacture like in real kind of local hubs. They have really kind of excellent kind of disassembly and remanufacturing, and all these kind of elements built into the design of their chairs. They're an amazing company. So, good chair. I also have one. I love it.
It's really, really. I can't remember the name of it, but I try and stand as much as I can now, because it's better for your health, isn't it? But when you sat down, you want something that's not going to ruin your back. So
it's true.
It's awesome, brilliant. Well, let's talk about building a career then in sustainable innovation. You've taught thousands of students. You've mentioned you've kind of supervised a dozen or so PhDs as well. And so, I probably fair to say you're well placed to advise people who want to follow a similar path. For someone interested in working at the intersection of design and sustainability, it might be a bit of a big question, but where should they start?
It's a question I get every single year, and because I have taught on this elective final year module for years, and I get sort of like 40 to 80 students coming through, and a good proportion of them are like, "Oh, this is really cool. How do I do more?" And I would say up until that 5 years ago, it was a really difficult question to answer, and I always felt like it's really difficult, because I can't really advise you, because there is not very much out there. And now it's completely different. So now I would say to people, then there's lots of different things. If you've learned about sustainability at university and it's something you know about, take confidence in the fact that you probably know more than the people who are trying to recruit you, or like the companies that you're going to go into. And actually having the confidence to be that expert in the room is a really great thing. So I attended a Design Declares event over the summer, and spoke to quite a lot of different students. They weren't students, sorry, they were graduates. And they were really keen and really kind of interested in sustainability, but kind of struggling to find their way a little bit. My kind of message to them was just be more brave and be more annoying. Like, be that conscience in the room, because actually if you can get into a design role, then you've been taken on because you've got the skills for the job. But that doesn't mean that the job doesn't evolve over time, and that the design industry doesn't need to evolve. And I think there's a lot of talk about that at the moment. There's some, if they aren't in Design Declares, I would definitely advise them to sign up for that. It's a really good initiative that kind of helps kind of back you in kind of what you think is important. And they run events where you can go along and speak to like-minded people. So that's a really good place to start. I would absolutely connect with everybody interesting on LinkedIn. I think it's a really good platform for finding really interesting people who are doing stuff within sustainability. And there's loads of free training out there. If you didn't do much in terms of sustainability at college or uni and you want to know more, then there's some really great all sorts of kind of programs out there, from ones that are offered by Oxford and Cambridge. They're kind of like, if you're embedded in a company and you want to go and learn more, they're really good programs if you're in that sort of position. Or there's things like the AXA Climate School, which are great for kind of upskilling a large kind of audience of people. There's a cost involved to all of those. But then there's, if you can, like YouTube and LinkedIn, and like there's all sorts of like training. You can learn all sorts. There's loads of free events out there as well. And get into networks that talk about these sort of things and just connect with people. I think to get into anything that you want to do, connection is key. And as you said earlier, if you can connect with people and you make a good impression and you show that you're like interested and knowledgeable, then opportunities will happen. Look at people's sustainability reports. If they sound a bit flaky, because there's a few out there that do, then they're probably not the ones to be following up. But there's lots of companies who are doing loads more in terms of sustainability now. And if their sustainability initiatives sound really interesting, then reach out to them. They're good companies to be working for.
Absolutely. Are there any tools or platforms that people should be being clued up on, or to give them an edge? Just thinking life cycle assessments, LCAs, or any kind of platforms that give you that kind of data. Is it advantageous to, be clued up in that area?
I think if you're that kind of person, then it could be. I wouldn't go anywhere near LCAs personally. I think from a design point of view, the outputs of an LCA are great, but doing them can take forever and they're really hard work. Carbon assessment is interesting. It's a good tool to have. You can quite relatively quickly calculate enough. So I said they're not necessarily that accurate, but you can calculate quickly enough to work out where your hotspots are and where the opportunities are. So carbon analysis can be a really useful tool to have. And that's the sort of thing that we do offer training through. So that is an opportunity. In terms of, there's free tools. So there's a tool on my website that's called the Design Abacus, which is something I teach to students, and I've used it with all sorts of people, across from undergrads, postgrads, clients, and it's a really kind of useful sort of better than, worse than analysis tool that you can use on any project you're working on. It's free. I adapted it from another organisation probably about 25 years ago, and it's like a really pared down version of it. And that's kind of interesting. So there's bits and pieces that you need. I think understanding the language of sustainability is quite important. I think it's becoming more complex. So, understanding what net zero means and what that means for companies and what that means for design a bit, because in terms of people who are working in product, actually net zero is quite a big deal, because the scope 3 bit, which is where the product sits, is the hardest bit. Everybody recognises it's generally about 80% of the impact of any company, and the hardest thing to deal with, because it's usually very much outside of your control. So I work with Triton showers at the moment, and they're very interested in reducing the impact of the showers that they create, and we're doing a lot of work in terms of looking at what that impact is and how you can reduce that, whether through different ways that people shower and using showers less, how you can look at remanufacturing and bringing all that stuff back in. So there's lots of different ways in which product designers can get involved with and have an impact in reducing the sustainability impact. But I think having a broad awareness and giving it a go would be my tips. And I think going back to people who are wanting to get into it as a career, doing some private projects and kind of picking something and going, well, let's see what I can come up with. Let's do some stuff. So actually, by doing that, you're learning quite quickly what works and what doesn't, and it won't be obviously within that kind of real life challenges like we find, for example, like working with the supply chain, that's manufacturing and supply and the supply chain relationships can actually be a real challenge. So that's again slightly different, but as a kind of stepping stone, that could be really, really useful as a way to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, massively. And once you've done that project as well, kind of break it into kind of easily digestible posts and like publicize it on LinkedIn. You know, get kind of share it with your network and create a conversation. So wonderful. So what's most exciting you about your work right now, and what are you most excited about kind of looking forward for the next 12 months? Fairly obvious one, given that you're about to go full time in the business.
Yeah. It all excites me. I love it. I think it's a really exciting time. There's a lot to do, and my kind of biggest like push at the moment is to connect with people who would benefit from my expertise, to help them to move stuff forward. And I find it really interesting working at that nitty gritty challenges and recognizing there's a massive difference between a student project and a project that's got like all these different protagonists and different stakeholders, and actually there's money involved, and everyone has a bit of an issue about it. So I really like that kind of like working in the messy bit, and helping find a way through. Whereas actually then seeing these things come to fruition, whereby like companies then turn around and go, "Oh my God, we saved like 15 tons of carbon," or like that's amazing, and actually kind of like also sharing that message and understanding actually 15 tons of carbon, it's a lot. A ton of carbon's like the equivalent of Land's End to John O'Groats. I can remember 3 or 5 times, something like that. I can't remember which. But so actually it's a lot. It's a lot of impact. So if you can kind of if you can engage people and they start to see difference, then actually it's very interesting how quickly like a little packaging project turns into, I want to look at this, I want to look at this. People get the bug for it. They can see they're saving money. They can see that they're de-risking the business. They kind of work out actually, okay, so this is an area we could work in. This is an area we can work in. And I think also that the thing I'm probably learning myself is that the drivers within the business are not necessarily who you think they're going to be. So I work a lot with a lot of sustainability managers, and they are the natural drivers. As I said, I mentioned this lady earlier who I'm working with, and like she's in ops and has kind of come at it from a completely different perspective, but gone actually, this is important. So I think it's really heartening that there's a lot more appetite and a lot of kind of engagement coming from all sorts of places, and hopefully looking for a good future.
No, it's really exciting. And finally, any books or podcasts that you'd recommend, either related to sustainability or just personal interest? Kind of dealer's choice there.
Well, actually, I'm dreadful. Obviously, apart from your own podcast, I only actually listen to one podcast, and that's very specifically to business development for people like myself. It's the High Vibe Tribe podcast, and it's specifically aimed at women developing businesses and getting their asses kicked by Dawn Owen, who's the coach who runs it.
Amazing.
It is X-rated, I think, so it might not be appropriate for your audience.
Some of the best things are, yeah.
It's very good, and I find it there's a lot of thought work goes in behind the work she does, and keeps me on the straight and narrow, which is good.
She's not made it easy for people to recommend the podcast, though. The High Vibe Tribe podcast. It's a tongue twister, isn't it? But
great when you trip over it. But I don't listen to many. I kind of go through phases. Like if I'm doing a project, I did a few projects on food a couple of years ago, and I just was listening to all these podcasts on like regenerative farming and all this stuff. But so I kind of dip in and out. But that's what I use.
That's your go-to.
Listen to. Yeah,
I love that because we have a lot of design consultants and freelancers that listen to the show, and and most of the job is sales, isn't it? Whether you define it as sales or define it as networking, whatever it is, you're constantly pitching or discovering kind of what problems you might be able to solve. So listening to podcasts like that, I listen to, there's one called the 30 Minutes to President's Club, which is a very American sales podcast, but it gets into the weeds. It's very granular on kind of tactics on business development, and then there's a bunch around kind of social marketing and stuff that I listen to, as well as the design stuff. So It's just
Yeah, there's obviously a diary of a CEO. I think everybody listens to that
Yeah.
every now and again. I do dip into that.
wonderful. Vicky, lovely to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time. If people want to reach out to you, they can do it on LinkedIn. We'll share your website as well on the
Yeah, that'd be
on the
great.
show notes. Good luck with the full time, and we will catch up soon.
Yeah, exciting times. Thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. It's been good to chat to you.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Why Design. If this episode gave you some new ideas, share it with someone in your team who'd find it useful. And follow the show so you don't miss what's next. And if you're building a product team or looking for your next challenge in design or engineering, that's exactly what we do at Kodu. We help companies hire smarter and faster and help great talent find work that actually fits. I'm Chris Whyte. Connect with me on LinkedIn and let's keep raising the bar for design leadership. Until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep asking why design.